Hello everyone, I'm Taaka Awori, founder and CEO of Busara Africa, a Pan-African leadership development firm. Welcome to the Leadership in Africa Redefined podcast. This podcast seeks to do two things. One, change the narrative of leadership in Africa, and two, provide concrete strategies and tips for leading in an African context. We do this by interviewing amazing African leaders so that the narrative of leadership in Africa is defined by the best of us, not the worst of us. We share their stories and provide practical suggestions for dealing with the challenges of leading on this continent. We discuss, interrogate, and examine concrete leadership practices that work. We also look at failures that these leaders faced and how they navigated their ways back on track. It's an exciting and empowering space for leaders to thrive and engage. Subscribe to the show to become the leader you have always wanted to be. And if you like the show, be sure you rate it and review it. It helps others to find it. Thanks so much. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leadership in Africa Redefined, the podcast. So excited to have another interesting conversation about a topic that I have been really thinking through, trying to struggle with for some time. And today we're talking about the role of masculinity, particularly African masculinity, in shaping leadership behavior. And I'm so excited because I have, again, one of my wonderful brothers joining me on the session. I have Dr. John Mugo, who is the Executive Director of Zizi Afrique Foundation based in Nairobi, Kenya. His research and programs address key themes connected to foundational learning, whole youth development, parental engagement, and empowerment and assessment of core competencies and values. And currently, and this is how John and I got to know each other, he's leading the Action for Life Skills and Values in East Africa, a live, consortium, network, and collaborates with the Ministry of Education in using evidence to support 100% transition to secondary school. So John is an experienced relationship builder with passion for systemic change in education. He's an accomplished and well-published scholar. He holds a doctorate, that's why I'm calling him Dr. John, and a master's degree in special needs education from the University of Hanover, Germany, and a Bachelor of Education in music. John, I never did that. Isn't that fascinating? From Kenyatta University, Kenya. I tell you why I'm also having John on this podcast, because I've actually seen John's leadership in action, and it's powerful. I facilitated a number of his organizational sessions with the Alive Project, and it's the type of leadership, and I've said this to him before, John, you are the type of leader Africa needs. And I see a lot of it is because you've done the inner work. And so this conversation of this podcast actually started in a coffee break, if you recall, from one of
yes.
that he was having with his leadership team. And I tell you, viewers, listeners, I was so curious about how I have seen John as someone who's deeply rooted in his culture, has a good understanding of the culture from which he is, but the way he also navigates that is very clear on himself as a man, but the way he navigates it and how it shows up in his leadership, I was like, there's something different here. There's something unusual here. And so I twisted his arm to bring him into this conversation, a very difficult one. So John, welcome, and thank you so much for saying yes. How are you today?
Fine, thank you, Taaka. Introducing me sounds like you're introducing somebody else. Really. And I'm really pleased. Although, you remember I told you, Taaka, this is not the kind of thing I want to be talking about. I don't want to be branded out there. But the fact remains that I'm an African man, and how I say I'm an African man. I'm born here in Africa. I grew up here in Africa. I live in Africa. I married in Africa. I will be buried in Africa. You know everything African. And I have transited, I think, my formation from the African rural setting. My parents never went to school. My father is a masculine African man, person. So I was born in the rural county of Kirinyaga, a place called Mwea, where rice is grown in Kenya. If you ask anyone Mwea, they'll know it because of rice. And I grew up there. I went to primary school there. I went to high school there, and I just showed up in the city coming to the university. So that can tell you the kind of now contrast I experience now in the urban environment where you are expected now to behave in a certain way. I came from the environment in the village where kind of only men were supposed to go to the university because girls didn't really make it. And so you emerge with that feeling, and then when you come to the city, oh, there are girls. And there are girls in the university, and many of them. And then because I was studying education and music, there are more girls than boys in the class. So that one now shaped me, challenged some of the notions I had held. And then moving now to do my graduate studies in Germany. Again, a very different environment on masculinity and how it shows up. And I went to again do a master's in education, and I think out of a class of like 50 would only be 3 or 4 men. Because again, in Germany, the teaching career, is also a largely women career. At least then, I don't know how things are now. It's more than 20 years ago. So that's who I am, and I commented that I was brought up by a father who is a real man. And he didn't want to see us entering the kitchen and so on. He would beckon on us to, come out and not adopt such kind of traits. But I had a tough mother, and I think I credit to what I'll be sharing later to my mother, because she always said that she recognized only one man in her household. And bear in mind, I have 4 brothers and 4 sisters. So what she meant, and she would add that if you think you're a man, then you had better go look for another mother. And so she said that whatever her daughters would do, her sons also must do, whether cooking, whether washing dishes, whether whatever. And I'll come back to what this contrast between my father and my mother meant. But lucky enough, my father was not always at home. So I think I took more from my mother than from my father. But glad nevertheless to come and talk about African masculinity. I now feel comfortable, I think, after going through this introduction. Let's do it.
Fascinating. And maybe I love the way you introduce this, because there's certain things we should say, listeners, as we begin this conversation. Is one, I like the reason we're having this conversation is that I have long recognized that indeed, John, you seem to be frozen, but I wonder if you can hear me okay. Good, you're good. I've long recognized that the way people practice leadership naturally is deeply connected to how they've been socialized in terms of what good leadership looks like, and what good looks like. And to me, what good looks like is very gendered. So on this podcast, we've talked about feminist leadership, and we've talked about how norms around what a good woman looks like, how women are supposed to show up in leadership spaces, and how that affects women's leadership. We've had that conversation. But I think the conversation we haven't had really is around, well, how do ideas around masculinity, particularly in the very diverse African context that we have, how do those types of ideas affect and shape how men lead? I thought that was important to be able to have that conversation on this. So just from hearing John's key things that he has said, it's clear that, for one, John, I see for you, your idea of masculinity evolved over time. And again, viewers, as you're listening to this, it's knowing, dear listeners, that we recognize all the diversity of that statement, African masculinity, and we could probably have like an entire podcast focus on this. Huh? So this is the beginning of an exploration of a conversation using John's experience. And what I'm hearing from you, John, is the idea of what it means to be a man in your context was initially shaped, it was developed in a rural context by a dad who had very clear ideas of this is what it means to be a man, but also a mother who challenged that in her own ways. Again, it was interrogated further by going to an urban area, Nairobi, and studying with a lot more women as you studied music, and then challenged further by being in Europe, in Germany, where again, different ideas of what does it mean to be a man. Huh? So if I had to ask you, maybe then my first question for you is, again, sometimes I'm so hesitant to ask this because of all the sense of stereotyping, but still, generally, what were some of the messages you got growing up, John, about how a man is supposed to behave and act in terms of the cultural norms? What were some of those general messages you got? Some of those general messages.
I know. There are very many things, but let me talk about three. That first, a man is supposed to be strong, is supposed to be firm, and is supposed to be reserved. So by strong, you are not expected to just break down anyhow or cry like women. When you lose someone, it's not you who has died. So why are you crying? And I think one typical example I can use is circumcision. That we go through, which involves cutting. The genitalia, and so the way in Western Kenya, where I know Taaka, you would know better than I, among the Bukusu, the Tiriki, when circumcision is happening, that boy that gets praise is the one who was cut and did not even blink.
Yes.
And that's the one that is worth of praise, of singing and all that. And the one who blinked or produced some sound or even cried becomes an object of mockery in the village. And so this strength and would always be reminded, why are you behaving like a woman, like a girl? Mm-hmm. You have to be strong. Now, in terms of being firm, you don't just agree to be pushed around by just anyone. When you make a decision, people have to respect that decision, even if it's with older women and all that. Your presence has to be felt, and people have to respect you for being a man. And I have this I love reading, so and some images stick in my mind, like this scene in Things Fall Apart, when Okonkwo, after he was accosted by the white people, and even his head was shaved and all that. So when he was walking home, he walked in the middle of the path. Mm-hmm. And when women would see him, coming from fetching water, they would all duck into the bush. That strength, the firmness, that's actually even how you expected to walk, not on the side, but on the middle of the road. And reserved is an interesting one. Okay. You don't talk too much like a woman. You don't gossip like women. You don't tell your problems to just everyone who doesn't have their problems anyway. and so for me, I think these three attitudes, I felt them. They were either mentioned or enforced through the behavior of older men or our fathers, and this is how we were expected to behave. as an African man growing up in a rural setting in Kenya. Thanks, Taaka.
Oh, interesting. And I know there's so many more, but I know many people can relate to this. It's not unusual. In many cultures, despite the diversity, I'm sure these were many key messages around you have to be strong, you have to be firm, and you have to be reserved. This is patriarchy in its essence in terms of the messages around what upholds masculinity. So I want to bring that to the leadership space. In terms of how does this play out in leadership? Because I know you have seen it, John. I know I have encountered it. When I see the leadership style and way of many African men I've encountered, I can see seems to have been shaped by this understanding of this is how I need to be as an African man. But let me hear it from you. What have you seen? Either how did this shape your leadership, or how have you seen these kinds of messages shape how different men lead?
Yeah, these things shape who we are, and as they say, you lead the way you are. And so I have seen many of my colleagues that didn't have as much privilege as I did to move across many spaces during my younger years struggle and trying to occupy a space that is just too difficult to occupy. And so let me revisit my three behaviors. Strong. The implication for many men who are in leadership is that your authority has to be felt. You have to be noticed where you are. So when you walk in the office, people have to feel you. People have to notice you have walked in. and so that notion of strength, authority, I'm the leader here. If anyone has doubts, kind of thing. I have seen it surface a lot among men leaders, but I think also among women. I think there are also women who, in their feminist style, have actually adopted a feminist masculinity. that now what we would be running from to occupy a middle, they now come to the other extreme. The firm, you are the head of the office. You make decisions and others follow. And whatever decisions you make shouldn't be questioned. So I have seen again men who don't leave a lot of space to negotiation, to being challenged, to being told no, and yet these are very useful things. That colleague who stands on your path makes you reflect in a different way. But this is not an easy thing when you're talking about African masculinity. Reserved, you don't mingle unnecessarily. You go to where your peers are. If you go to golf clubs and all that, you'll find a lot of, I think, men leaders, because that's the space where your peers are. You don't just go to places where you are likely to mingle with the people that report to you, with your staff. You don't let your colleagues know you too much. Otherwise, they might use this information to undermine you. So I have seen this kind of isolated leader, domineering leader, one who it's either my way or the highway. I am the decision maker here, non-negotiation, but also lacking adaptability and that's learning possession, and we know how important learning is, and I'll come to that later. So this I think for me is how I see masculinity, African masculinity, playing in leadership for people like I.
Hi folks, hope you're enjoying the show. So have you heard about the African Leaders Circle? Our impactful e-learning platform that enables you to grow into the leader you would want to follow? Here is a message to tell you what you need to know.
Are you a CEO, executive director, or HR manager that is looking to build a pipeline of leaders that are ready to step up into management roles? Are you looking for a self-paced learning platform that provides your leaders with quality content and does not take them away from their work for too long? Are you looking for a program that enables your managers to move from knowledge acquisition to demonstrable improved practice? Then look no further. Sign them up for the African Leaders Circle today. The African Leaders Circle is an e-learning platform that gives your managers access to an exclusive community of leaders across the continent and a wide range of strategies and tools to stand out. We do this through online courses, discussion forums, a library of resources, and a personal learning advisor to support each of your managers to maximize their learning on the platform. To learn more, visit our website www.busara-africa.com.
Don't forget to visit our website busara-africa.com to learn more. And now back to the show. I tell you, it's fascinating because in so many leadership development programs where we're installing the virtues of a lot more distributive leadership, we talk endlessly about emotional intelligence, being vulnerable, where we're talking again about a lot more egalitarian leadership, where you talk openly, you mix, you're less hierarchical, a lot more, again, I talked about distributed leadership, so not more like I must be the leader, nobody else is the leader. And I realize even as we install all those virtues, this new way of leading, which I consider a lot more feminist way of leading, I think the mistake that we haven't been doing as we're working with many of our male leaders is working through how this idea of masculinity may be rubbing against these new ways of leadership, the emotionally intelligent, vulnerable, open, engage, open door, come in. I'm open to talk to you. I'm not, there's not a wall, in between us. Huh? And so maybe my next question to you then, John, is, because what I'm learning from this conversation is that unless we engage this idea of masculinity and how people see themselves as men, it's hard for many of these male leaders to change. So how, from your experience, what are the best ways of engaging and having conversations and opening the door to redefining potentially a masculinity that enables our male leaders to practice the leadership that we need?
Let me say, Taaka, that it's not all.
Yes, it's not all negative.
Negative.
Yeah,
it's not all negative, and maybe that's where I should start. And I know we were to come to this conversation later. So how has this masculinity, now using my example, helped me?
Okay.
And how have I seen masculinity limit me or limit other men leaders that I'm closely connected to?
Yeah.
The positive side of this is things like courage and confidence. Because regardless of whether you are a woman or man, as a leader, you need courage because you'll face challenging situations. You will face, things that you have to deal with boldly because decisions have to be made when you're a leader. And so I have seen courage, this being natural, more natural to me than when I look at my women leader colleagues. That because this was formed in me, then I approach challenges with a lot of courage, which is natural, and I don't have to work, on it so much. The second reflection is around negotiation. When you look at findings, for instance, that women, even for the same job, the same positions, women are paid less. I think it's because men ask for more without shame.
Yeah.
that that when or even for me now, because I do a lot of fundraising, the work that Zizi Afrique does, it depends on funders. When I'm asked how much I'm talking about, I wouldn't say little money. I would say a lot. And I've had some of my funders scream when I mention some of those figures, like, what? We don't give such kind of monies. And then at the end, they will still end up giving you anyway, because funders also need to give money. So I think this negotiation, starting from a very high point, is a good thing for leaders, because that's also how we start ambitious. We set up ambitious targets. And so I have seen this masculinity support me in some of these ways, that I'm able to go for a big thing, something challenging. I'm able to take risks, and that was my third thing. Risk appetite is something that I think is associated with a lot of this masculinity, because you go to places where you shouldn't, and many times we burn our fingers, but many times also this risk appetite leads to discoveries, to moving as a leader beyond where you even thought you would reach. So masculinity is not all positive, and this is how I have seen it, support me, the background that I have. But there are limitations also and shortcomings. And one of these, for instance, where women are really better, is extroversion, expression, because communication is everything. With the office I work in now, we are having men as a minority. And it's not because we don't have men applying to positions, but it's because when they show up in an interview, you ask a question to a female candidate, and she goes on and uses examples and illustrates that skill you are looking for. You ask the same thing to a male candidate, and respond with one sentence or two sentences, and you have to move on to the next question. And so you end up very impressed by the female candidate just because they were able to express themselves. They were able to bring out. They were able to, say what they were saying. And so this extroversion as a quality for leadership, I think it's important even for introverts to learn. Like I am an introvert myself, but I cannot use introversion as an excuse of not speaking out, and so this is more natural to a feminist than people like I. The second is empathy, and I see empathy as capital. Women have a way of just empathizing with you, connecting with your heart, and this is very critical for relationship building. And as you said, distributed leadership, collective impact, these are pieces of our work that we do. Systems change. It's about working with people. And so if you show up as an arrogant person, as I don't know what, you are the one who knows, you never listen, that side of masculinity, then you turn off many people. And you're really incapacitated in your relationship building. And so embracing empathy, learning how to be empathetic, learning how to connect, learning how to listen is not very natural to many of us as male leaders. And the third one is collaboration skills. A lot of what we have to do today in the social impact space is about knowing how to work with others, connect with others. And that comes with respect. That I don't meet you, Taaka, and I think you're a woman and I'm a man. It doesn't cross my mind, because we are here to do something together. Yeah. And when I know many male leaders who have a problem, when the chairperson of the meeting or whatever is a woman, and I'm not making this up. I have seen it. And so that inhibition of people that are eaten up by this African masculinity, they become actually incapable of leading because they are not able to grow their enterprise, because enterprise grows now through collaborating and working with others. And so these limitations of the African masculinity, I've seen this play also. And what now it calls for leaders is to embrace gender transformative thinking, is to appreciate gender as a diversity, which brings strength to whatever work we are doing. Being sensitive so that if I know I'm limited as now a CEO man, then ensuring that the next person below me is a woman, so that she's able to complement me. And the perspectives I bring, that I bring out this negative masculinity, then she's able to either bring that to my attention or even occupy the space so that we are able to collaborate and win together. Thanks.
I really like the way you've approached this. Because what I'm hearing you say, John, is that there are certain ways you were socialized as a man to be that have been really beneficial to you in your leadership roles. Huh? So being socialized to be courageous, powerful when you're a leader. Huh? Being socialized to negotiate hard. Huh? And that's what a man does. Really powerful in leadership roles. And being socialized as a man to take risks. Huh? Those are examples of how those things that were told to you, that's what a man does, have been super, super useful to you and have been a strength in leadership. And so thank you for reminding us that there's some positive aspects of that, yeah? But what I'm also hearing you say clearly is that there were some things you missed out that women were more socialized around, that were missed out from the masculinity side. So women were socialized to be communicators, whether we like to communicate or not. We're socialized. A good woman knows how to communicate, is whether you're an introvert or not, you know how to, as you said, I love it how you said it in the interviews, express yourself. It's a premium that's put on how you're socialized as a woman. One, empathy. We're taught to be empathetic. And finally, we're taught how to collaborate with others and bring others in. But I like what you ended with by saying that given some of these limitations in terms of how we are socialized differently, the invitation for leaders, particularly those who might be inundated with some of these more negative aspects of masculinity, is to leverage diversity and gender transformation, where you're a lot more inclusive. So where you're struggling, you are better able to bring in others who have those qualities. And plus one, definitely affirm that. But I wonder then still though, John, if I go back to the way the story you started with, in terms of how your ideas of masculinity evolved from the different spaces, from Kirinyaga to Nairobi, from Germany and back to Kenya. What do you think? Culture is not static. These ideas of masculinity are coming from culture, but that's not static. What needs to evolve in the way we understand masculinity in the African context from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, a very good question. I think what needs to first change is that it's not an either or.
Okay.
Because some of this also has something to do with genetics. The fact that I guess a strong dose of testosterone, contributes to risk-taking behavior, even when I don't like it, I don't want it. That hormone is in me. There's the same for you, Taaka. That hormone is in you, we like it or not. So, but I think rather than an either or, it is moving to the middle. It is not losing my masculinity or you losing your femininity.
feminism.
Femininity, or whatever, what it means to be a woman. It's not losing what it means to be a woman.
Yes, yes. It's not you losing that and me losing this. It is about being aware, first of all, self-awareness of the role it plays in shaping my attitude and the way I relate with others and the way I lead. That self-awareness is critical, so that where I know I have a strength, I'm able to elevate it where it's needed. And where I know I'm limited, I'm able to step down to allow another person to step up. So that can only be possible through self-awareness. I think the narratives that are spread, it's like men should lose this masculinity, and I don't know now what we will be, because we won't be women. But the fact that these attributes both are important, and that's why diversity, is a critical component in leadership. The other thing is to facilitate a process where, like, young people growing up access tools that they could use, to form attitudes that will propel their success into leadership. Like, I give an example. So where I grew up in my family and in the village, men don't cook. And even today, not just then, but also today, I go to my village a lot. And I went with you there, Taaka, you know the village I'm talking about. So the the fact that men don't cook is a limitation.
Yeah.
Because what will you do when you have to eat and you can't always buy food, from the restaurant? So one of the things really as a tool, an opportunity I accessed through my mother was her insistence that it didn't matter whether you are a boy or girl in her household. She did a roster where, if you are put in for breakfast, you would make breakfast for everyone and all that. And I remember there were quite a number of times, like, you'd be allocated. The worst was scrubbing pots. And we didn't have a kitchen, so we were doing this outside. So you'd be in a certain corner of the compound and a certain tree scrubbing these dishes. And then a friend of yours, a schoolmate or a classmate, walks into the compound, is sent to come fetch salt or fetch fire. Those are the kind of things people would do. And so if what we did was then position ourselves in a way that when you are scrubbing and doing those female chores, you'll be facing the gate. You'll be facing the gate, so that when you see them coming in, you duck behind the tree. Otherwise, you'll become the laughing stock in the next school day at school, how they came to your place and they found you cooking, or they found you doing stuff. So we had all those challenges, but I appreciated it when I was around 19, 20 years old, when I had to cook for myself. And I can tell you, Taaka, that when I compared myself now with other boys who didn't grow up with a mother like mine, I had to show them how to cook, when even doing simple things like making tea and all that, they wouldn't do. And this became now an attitude that I wasn't limited into things I would venture into, or those that I wouldn't venture into. Like my ending up in music, even though I said then was a largely female career, being a music teacher was just something that I enjoyed, and it didn't matter. And you can see now, even today, how much that music background helps me in navigating tasks that require creativity or that require a certain sense of rhythm and so on. So I think understanding and giving tools, giving opportunities, forming attitudes among girls and boys, so that they embrace this open, adaptive way of living and being, becomes a very useful contribution. So it is not a narrative around, how, we should have more women in leadership, which we should, and we should work towards that. But that's not enough. It's about how boys and girls grow up, because that is what determines whether they'll end up as leaders or not. Taaka.
This is powerful. And it's getting me to think, and listeners, forgive us. I know part of this conversation we've talked about in very binary terms, male, female, where I recognize that increasingly we're recognizing it's not just male, female. But what I hear you saying, John, is it's a real invitation to, again, I liked you started with awareness, and awareness being so key, that awareness. And to me, what I'm hearing is that it's awareness that gender is truly socially constructed. And therefore, an openness, in fact, you said being open and adaptive and starting young with young folks, to constantly interrogate these shoulds, because some of these shoulds are sometimes not helping. They're saying, you should not cook. Then comes to bite you when you can't actually cook wonderful meals for yourself, or the different examples one may give. So as we interrogate these and start to say, well, what makes sense for me? And it's starting to recognize that we start to redefine what it means to be, quote unquote, a good man, a good person, a good woman, good whatever it is. And what I like about where I feel you've headed is the younger we start with that openness about saying what makes sense for me, rather than just assuming all those shoulds and those culturally imposed norms, the more open one is to then coming into leadership spaces and determining what is the leadership that's needed right now, but hopefully also then leveraging the best of what we have within us. Both from the empathy to the courage, and developing those leadership skills early and those leadership characteristics early, without that labeling of this is how a man should be or how a woman should be. So the earlier one starts, I guess, the better.
Right? The better, yeah, because some of these attitudes are formed very, very early in life, and they affect us. Some are stamped so heavily that they remain like our involuntary brand through life. So I think for me, starting early is really key in whatever interventions we are thinking about.
And for me, I'm taking away from this conversation the courage to have continued dialogue in our leadership development programs that we implement as Busara, with our male and, with all the leaders, to say, how have, let me even just say with the men leaders, to say, how has your socialization around masculinity informed how you show up as a leader? And how would that need to shift for you to practice these new things we're suggesting? I can tell you, we've never had that conversation. I think it's only been once, where we were once talking about emotions. It was a session on emotional intelligence, John. And somebody said, please just stop. For me, this thing you're talking about, emotions, is not something, just what you were saying, that thing of being reserved. He says, and even you're saying I must get a coach. I'm used to speaking to a coach. Why should I go tell anybody my problems? And I started to realize, again, we've come with these solutions and ways of being that we're seeing are required in leadership, but we are not exploring how some of these ideas around how we've been socialized are getting in the way of practicing these new norms. So that's something I will be doing differently. John, your final word on this before we close out the session.
My thing is to encourage other men like me who are in leadership positions to be conscious about how we lead and how gender and attitudes of masculinity affect us and our leadership. What I know is that it's possible with increased self-awareness. You can pay attention to that and be able to to sense when this is coming up and be able to deal with it. Not to say that you'll become a different person, but to say that we will be able to leverage the best and bring the best out of us to lead. And so mine is just an encouragement to all people that grew up like me, that these attitudes are possible to embrace, to take up, and our leadership for sure would be better. I think I encourage you as a leadership coach, Taaka, to also see maybe this requires a module somewhere.
Because even for me, I feel like there's so much I need to understand. I'm not sure. Am I using the right language? Are there perspectives we haven't? You are so right. We need more. We need to think more, isn't it? Learn more.
And because a lot is written and published about and talked about feminism.
Yeah.
And for us as men, it's like we are not supposed to talk about masculinity because it's all negative.
Yeah.
And so we don't have anything published. We don't have anything. I'm not even allowed to talk about it because it will show up in a bad way. So probably even in the feminist movement, to see, how does masculinity show up in feminism, and what are the negatives and the positives, when this happens, and so I think you opening this conversation, I feel really grateful. No one has ever asked me these questions, Taaka. I feel so grateful. It was hard for me to know even what to say in a way that I'm not offending others. You can see where I'm coming from. But thank you that this conversation has instilled confidence in me to talk about me and my past and how this shapes my leadership today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. It says a lot about you in terms of your sense of your masculinity, because you were open to being vulnerable and have a conversation, because I also didn't know how it would go. So listeners, if we've said things that are, we haven't said it quite right, forgive us. John and I are also still trying to explore this. But John, thank you for stepping out on the path for what I believe will be a continued conversation and continued learning on this. And I hope we can pull you in again as we continue to learn more about this. Thank you, my brother. Deeply appreciate you.
Thank you, and request to our listeners to share feedback.
Yes.
We want to become better.
Yes. Hello, wonderful leader. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the podcast. I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. If you want more of the lessons, experiences, and nuggets for effective leadership, join our amazing platform for leaders, the African Leaders Circle. Learn more at www.busara-africa.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and share with other amazing leaders. See you soon. Ciao.